Seconds here for everybody to come in to the virtual auditorium. That will take generally 30 seconds or so. And watching the number of people coming in continue to increase. So I'll wait another few seconds until it levels off, and then we will actually formally begin. It's nice to see our auditorium filling up with people. And I think perhaps this is a good. Welcome everyone to the Wilmette Institute's webinar for whatever today is, July 16th, 2013. And today, we will be hearing from Jena Khadem about the banishment of Bahá'u'lláh from Baghdad to Constantinople and beyond. We hope that you will enjoy this program and take the information to your friends as well. The purpose of our webinar series is to highlight the immense diversity of the Baha'i teachings and the way they contribute to the contemporary world, and particularly to the prevailing discourses of society. As I said, today we will be focusing on the life of Bahá'u'lláh, the founder of the faith, and his travels in the Middle East as a result of his banishment. And as our speaker today, we have Jena Khodadad. She is a fourth generation Iranian Baha'i who received her PhD degree from Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, in the biological sciences with a focus on cellular and molecular biology. She followed that with postdoctoral studies and faculty positions in medical and graduate schools. Her academic career in medical and graduate programs included both teaching and research. She's published in numerous scientific journals and academic books on her topics in biology. She's also deeply interested in the study of Baha'i history, as we will hear today. Also, the fundamental principles of the Baha'i faith, such as the harmony of science and religion. Who wouldn't be interested in that as a biologist, after all? She's particularly interested in the application of scientific principles to an appreciation and understanding of the Baha'i worldview. She continues to contribute to public discourse and dialogues on some of the challenges of our times, and she's also committed to the enhancement of interfaith understanding, and she's been involved in quite a few interfaith efforts as well. Before I turn the program over to her, however, I should say a little something about our upcoming events while I have a kind of captive audience here. We have two other webinars coming up later this month, the next two Sundays, in fact. Next week, we have a panel on religion and science in a globalized world, which consists of 2 or 3 people who've all published in the same book on religion and science. And so it's a panel of authors who've published together. We will have a second panel, I believe, in October of other authors from that particular book. Then on July 30th, Mikhail Sergeyev will be speaking about the Baha'i faith in Russia, history and current developments. He's currently working on a history of the growth of the Baha'i faith in Russia. We have no courses this July in our Wilmette Institute extension course program, but we have 3 of them coming up in August. We have a Science, Religion, and the Baha'i Faith course starting on August the 16th, followed by a course on the 7 Valleys and 4 Valleys to Creative Arts Expression on August 23rd, and then Operationalizing Moral Excellence in Business on August 30th. All of these courses are about 7 or 8 weeks long, and you can sign up very easily on our website for any one of them. Now, having finished our little advertisement for Wilmette Institute courses, we will now turn to Jena Khadem and her presentation. Jena, welcome to the Wilmette Institute's webinar series. We're delighted to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will now turn the floor over to you.
It's a pleasure to be here. The banishment and exile of Bahá'u'lláh from Baghdad to Constantinople and beyond. It is with much pleasure that I offer this presentation in the setting of the Wilmette Institute webinar. This presentation is entitled The Banishment and Exile of Bahá'u'lláh from Baghdad to Constantinople and beyond, leading to the proclamation of Bahá'u'lláh to the world and its reader, its acme, the pinnacle of the disclosure of his mission. For long, my thoughts and sentiments have been centered on the suffering and hardship that Bahá'u'lláh endured during the 40-year period of his 4 banishments and exiles. I continue to be inspired and fascinated by the poetry and the passion of that 40-year period, a period that culminated at its highest point, its acme in his proclamation to the world and its rulers. Through this presentation, I wish to offer my reflections, my perspective on this harsh yet magnificent period from the life of Bahá'u'lláh, a period centered on the disclosure of his revelation, a period that spanned over 40 years through 4 successive banishments and exiles, taking him from his native land, Iran, to Baghdad, Iraq, and from Baghdad on to Constantinople, from Constantinople to Adrianople, and on through the Ottoman Empire, where he remained in exile to the end of his earthly life in 1892. The ministry of Bahá'u'lláh culminated in his 3rd glorious phase through his proclamation to the world and to its rulers. This presentation will be accompanied throughout with PowerPoint slides. PowerPoint slides facilitate order. Most importantly, they provide valuable means for inclusion of the sources of information and citations used throughout this presentation. This talk, The Banishment and Exile of Bahá'u'lláh from Baghdad to Constantinople and beyond, has its start from that joyous and awe-inspiring declaration of Bahá'u'lláh in the Garden of Ridvan, a disclosure that took place on April 21 through May 2nd, 1863. It will advance on May 3rd from the Declaration of Bahá'u'lláh in the Garden of Ridvan, and thereon set on the path of his banishment toward Constantinople and beyond through the Ottoman Empire. The life of Bahá'u'lláh, as the lives of the prophet founders of the great religions of the world, was beset with hardship, persecution, imprisonment, and also banishment and exile. In this presentation, I wish to share my reflections, my perspective on the exile and the 4 banishments of Bahá'u'lláh. May the magnitude, the poetry, and the passion of such glorious yet harsh period from the life of Bahá'u'lláh continue to inspire, energize, and sustain us. The prophetic mission of Bahá'u'lláh unfolded through 3 phases. The first phase, the secret intimation to Bahá'u'lláh in the prison known as the Siyah in Tehran, Iran in 1852. Through the most great spirit personified as the maiden. The second phase, the declaration, the announcement by Bahá'u'lláh of his mission to his companions in Baghdad, Iraq in 1863. That disclosure, that announcement reached its zenith in the 3rd phase, the proclamation of his mission from Constantinople, Adrianople, and on to the penal colony of Akka, to the kings and rulers from 1863, starting from Constantinople and continuing across to the end of Bahá'u'llah's earthly life in 1892. Now a brief look, an overview of the course of the continuing banishment and exile of Bahá'u'lláh on a simplified schematic map of the region. This map shows Iran and the neighboring Iraq. At that time, Iraq was part of the Ottoman Empire. That secret intimation to Bahá'u'lláh was the first phase of the unfoldment of that revelation. In 1852, in Tehran, Iran, in the prison known as the Siyarchar. On January 12, 1853, just a few months after the release of Bahá'u'lláh from that prison, together with some of the members of his family, Bahá'u'lláh was banished from Iran, escorted by an officer of the imperial, the bodyguard, to assure his safety. He set out on a 3-month journey in severe cold of winter over the western snow-capped mountains of Iran toward Iraq, and arriving in Baghdad on April 1853. A year later, on April 8, 1854, together with an attendant, Bahá'u'lláh suddenly set out toward the wilderness of Sulaymaniyeh in the mountains of Kurdistan. Removed from human habitation, he lived in Sargalu mountain. His sojourn in Sargalu may be likened to the seclusion of the prophet founders of the great religions of the world. Moses went to the mountain, Mount Sinai. Moses stayed there for 40 days and 40 nights. He received the 10 commandments. Jesus went to the wilderness, the desert. Muhammad went to a cave in Mount Hira near Mecca and received messages through Gabriel. After almost 2 years of seclusion in Sulaymaniyeh, Bahá'u'lláh returned to Baghdad on March 19, 1856. 7 years later, on April 21, 1863, was that magnificent second phase in the announcement, disclosure of his mission. In that idyllic setting that has come to be known as the Garden of Ridvan. The disclosure of the mission of Bahá'u'lláh reached its acme, its zenith, through its third phase, starting from Constantinople and on to Adrianople, and continuing onward to Akka, where he was an exile in the penal colony of Akka to the end of his earthly life in 1892. The second phase in the unfoldment of Bahá'u'llah's prophetic mission was in the Garden of Ridvan. The Declaration of Bahá'u'lláh in the Garden of Ridvan, known as the Najibiyya Garden. The Declaration of Bahá'u'lláh in the Garden of Ridvan was from April 21 to May 2nd, 1863. The second phase in the disclosure of the mission of Bahá'u'lláh to his companions. This phase was followed by that final glorious stage, his proclamation to the kings and rulers of his time. Now I wish to reflect on that celebrated declaration in the Garden of Ridvan. Bahá'u'lláh was in the Garden of Ridvan from April 21 to May 3rd. The period of his declaration was from April 21 to May 2nd. His departure from the Garden of Ridvan was on May 3rd. Now, some years since, let us see ourselves in the setting of the Garden of Ridvan. Let us place ourselves in his presence. Let us relish the beauty and the fragrance of his roses, the songs of his nightingales, but foremost, the presence of Bahá'u'lláh in our midst. The eminent Baha'i historian Nabil A'zam relates, every day at the hour of dawn, the gardeners would pick the roses which lined the 4 avenues of the garden and would pile them in the center of the floor of his blessed tent. All these roses, Bahá'u'lláh would, with his own hands, entrust to those who dismissed from his presence every morning to be delivered on his behalf to his Arab and Persian friends in the city. Nabil continues, so great would be the heap of roses that when his companions gathered to drink their morning tea in his presence, they would be unable to see each other across it. Nabil continues, one night, the 9th night of the waxing moon, I happened to be one of those who watched beside his pleasant tent. As the hour of midnight approached, I saw him issue from his tent, pass by the places where some of his companions were sleeping, and begin to pace up and down the moonlit flower-bordered avenues of the garden. Nabil relates, so loud was the singing of the nightingales. Nightingales are proverbial for their expression of love and adoration for the rose. From dusk to dawn, a nightingale sings his adoration for the rose. In poetic and mystical writings, the singing of the nightingale symbolizes the love of the lover for the beloved. Among poets and mystics, the love of nightingale for the rose symbolizes the impassioned and enraptured love of the lover for the beloved, the love of man for the divine. So loud was the singing of the nightingale on every side that only those who were near him could hear distinctly his voice. Baha'u'lláh continued to walk until pausing in the midst of one of those avenues. He observed, "Consider these nightingales. So great is their love for these roses that sleepless from dusk till dawn, they warble their melodies and commune with burning passion with the object of their adoration. How then can those who claim to be afire with the rose-like beloved choose to sleep?" Regarding the significance of the declaration of Bahá'u'lláh in the Garden of Ridvan, Bahá'u'lláh acclaims that historic occasion as the most great festival, as the king of festivals, the day whereon all created things were immersed in the sea of purification. Rejoice with exceeding gladness, O people of Baha, as you call to remembrance the day of supreme felicity. On this occasion, Bahá'u'lláh revealed a magnificent tablet. The divine springtime is come. It is in exquisite form. Bahá'u'lláh holds a magnificent dialogue with his pen symbolizing the vehicle of his sacred writings. The tablet starts with Bahá'u'lláh addressing his pen with these words: "The divine springtime is come, O most exalted pen, for the festival of the All-Merciful is fast approaching. Bestir thyself and magnify before the entire creation the name of God and celebrate his praise in such wise that all created things may be regenerated and made new. Speak and hold not thy peace." The tablet continues, "Arise before the nations of the earth and arm thyself with the power of this most great name, and be not of those who tarry." The departure of Bahá'u'lláh from the Garden of Ridvan. The order of Ali Pasha, the prime minister of the Ottoman Sultan, had been communicated to Bahá'u'lláh through Jena Pasha, the governor of Baghdad, for the banishment of Bahá'u'lláh toward Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. In courteous language, the letter invited Bahá'u'lláh to proceed to Constantinople as the guest of the Ottoman government. Thus, order had been issued for his banishment from Baghdad to Constantinople. Namir Pasha, who had great respect for Bahá'u'lláh, handed a written order to the officer assigned to accompany Bahá'u'lláh, commanding the governors of the provinces through which the exiles would be passing to extend to them their utmost consideration. Alas, the time of the departure of Bahá'u'lláh from the Garden of Ridvan had come. The departure was at noon on 14th of Zulqa'dah, 1279 Anno Hijra, that is May 3rd, 1863. Believers and unbelievers alike sobbed and lamented. Emotions were stirred to such depths as no tongue can describe. Visualizing that departure, mounted on his steed, a red-roan stallion of the finest breed, the best his lovers could purchase for him, and leaving behind him a bowing multitude of fervent admirers, he rode forth on the first stage of a journey that was to carry him to the city of Constantinople. Numerous were the heads, which on every side bowed to the dust at the feet of his horse and kissed its hoofs, and countless were those who pressed forward to embrace his stirrups. Bahá'u'lláh left the Garden of Ridvan on May 3rd, 1863. The journey of Bahá'u'lláh from Baghdad toward Constantinople. The sun was about to set when they reached Firayjat. 3 miles away on the bank of the Tigris. Baha'u'lláh was in Firayjat for several days. In Firayjat, horses were made to run a course to test them. On May 9, 1863, accompanied by members of his family and 26 of his disciples, Baha'u'lláh set out from Firayjat on the course of a journey toward Constantinople. The caravan continued onward, taking this path through 21 villages and small towns, up to Ilahiyeh. From Ilahiyeh, they proceeded onward towards Samsun on the shore of the Black Sea, and from Samsun on to Sinop, to Aniaboli, to Constantinople, arriving on Constantinople on August 16. Abdul-Baha has given a vivid and delightful account of the spirit of that journey in his memoir of Mirza Aghay Munir, Janab Munir. Let us visualize that idyllic yet arduous journey, a procession of a caravan of Hudas through mountainous roads and valleys. A distance of almost 1,000 miles in 110 days headed towards Samsun on the shore of the Black Sea. A caravan towards Samsun on the Black Sea. A caravan of 50 mules, 26 disciples of Baha'u'lláh, family members of Baha'u'lláh, a mounted guard of 10 soldiers with their officers, 7 pairs of hudas, each pair surmounted by 4 parasels. This is a drawing, a rendition of Kajave or Huda. Each pair surmounted by 4 parasels, wending its way across the uplands and through the roads, fields, woods, valleys, and pastures, through the picturesque Eastern Anatolia, heading toward the port of Samsun on the Black Sea. Kajave settled on mules. While on move, Baha'u'lláh was seated in his Kajave. Baha'u'lláh was a masterful horseman. He would mount his horse when approaching a village or town to meet the officials. Let us bring forth those scenes. Haji Mahmud walked in front, holding the reins of the mule, which bore Baha'u'llah's Kajave. Ibrahim Amir Neirizi and Janab Munib walked on either side of the Kajave of Baha'u'lláh. Munib, an accomplished youth, educated, a calligrapher and a poet, carried a lantern in front of the Kajave of Baha'u'lláh. Munib insisted on walking the entire distance of 1,000 miles along Baha'u'llah's Kajave on foot. Abdul-Baha, at that time 19 years old, describes how many nights he and Janab Munib walked on either side of the Huda, the Kajave of Baha'u'lláh. Let us call forth those stirring scenes. As they proceeded throughout the way, they sang continuously. They sang with ecstasy and in jubilation. One of their songs was an ode from the Persian poet Hafiz. In the Persian language, بیا تا گل برافشانیم و می در ساغر اندازیم فلک را سخت بشکافیم و طرحی نو در اندازیم. Come, let us scatter roses. Let us burst through the roof of heaven and bring forth a new order. In this manner, the caravan continued on this path. Let us visualize once again the path of that magnificent procession. They proceeded through over 21 small towns and villages, uplands and lowlands, to Ilahiyeh. From Ilahiyeh, they proceeded towards Samsun on the Black Sea, and from Samsun to Sinop, and on to Aniaboli, and on to Constantinople, where they arrived on the 16th of August. Throughout its arduous journey towards Samsun, they had numerous challenges, including repair of Kajave, guiding horses, the care, well-being, and feeding of animals, tortuous roads, and hazardous mountain passes. Due to the heat of the day, it was customary to travel by night. Thus, at times, they lost their way. The account of this journey was related by the devoted Agha Hussein Ashchi, a native of Kashan. Ashchi served as a cook. He accompanied Baha'u'lláh during all stages of his exile to Akka. Ashti lived throughout the period of the ministry of Abdul-Baha and into the early years of the ministry of the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, Shoghi Effendi. He recorded much of this history. Each day that they traveled, they covered a distance of 25 to 30 miles. Each person had daily tasks and responsibilities, with a detailed list of daily duties and those who were assigned to discharge them. At the end of the day, on reaching a caravanserai, from sheer exhaustion, they would go to sleep. Abdul-Baha had little rest. During the stops, he saw to it that the large party, including the animals, were supplied with food and daily necessities. Each one of these places had its own adventures and challenges. By virtue of the written order of Ali Pasha, the governor of Iraq, enthusiastic reception was afforded to the caravan. In some of these places, they received the warm welcome of its officials and inhabitants. In some of these stops, they were received with splendor, with government cavalry, flags, and drums. In some stops, the whole town came out to hail them and see the safe passage of the caravan. In some of these places, such as Salahiyeh, high officials, the Ha'im Maqam himself, and other notables came to greet the caravan, offered their respect, and held a festival in their honor. In some stops, such as Zaku, they were also received and greeted by the Ha'im Maqam and other notables who had waited at the roadside to greet them, had prepared a feast for them, provided protection, and escorted them. In Mardin, the road lay through this main street of Mardin. Government cavalry with flags flying and drums beating preceded the caravan, escorted by the Mustarif, the governor himself, and other high officials and notables. The whole town had come out to see the passage of the caravan. In Kharput, the acting governor general came to call on them, offering support from the governor general, Ali Pasha. In this manner, the caravan continued on this path through the picturesque Eastern Anatolia, coursing through fields, woods, pastures, valleys, lowlands, and uplands of mountains, such as this in Amasya. In such spirit, they coursed through the entire path towards Samsun on the Black Sea. Throughout, they continued singing those very verses from Hafiz, again, Biata گل برافشانیم و می در ساغر اندازیم فلک را سخت بشکافیم و در حنا در اندازیم. Come, let us scatter roses. Let us burst through the roof of heaven and bring forth a new order. That journey was idyllic. That journey was blissful because Bahá'u'lláh was in their midst. At times it was arduous, the challenges were extreme, yet there was jubilation with songs and poetry. The presence of Bahá'u'lláh made it heavenly. The course of Bahá'u'lláh's banishment from Baghdad to Constantinople on a schematic map of the region. The journey of the caravan of Hudas, following the second phase in the unfoldment of his revelation, coursed through from Baghdad through over 22 villages and small towns. In 110 days, the caravan arrived in Samsun on the shore of the Black Sea. In Samsun, the chief inspector of the entire province, extending from Baghdad to Constantinople, accompanied by several pashas, called on Bahá'u'lláh to offer their utmost respect. The arrival of Bahá'u'lláh in Samsun on the shore of the Black Sea. The triumphant had taken them across the mountains and valleys of Anatolia, while drawn close to the shore of the Black Sea, sitting in his kajave. On that wondrous occasion, Bahá'u'lláh revealed aloud the tablet Surah Hodaj in honor of that triumphant journey. After 7 days, the Ottoman steamer arrived. 2 boats took them to the ship, one in which Bahá'u'lláh sat with members of his family, and the other members of his retinue. They took the boat from Samsun to Sinop and the following day to Anyapoli. On the third day, Sunday, August 16, 1863, Bahá'u'lláh arrived in Constantinople, Istanbul. The arrival of Bahá'u'lláh in Constantinople, August 16, 1863. Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire and the seat of the Caliphate. During his 4-month sojourn in Constantinople, in addition to the tablet Subhanaka Yahu, also known as the tablet of the bell, tablet of Navruz, Bahá'u'lláh revealed the Lawh Abdul Aziz wa Wakala. The tablet was addressed to Sultan Abdul Aziz and representatives. To an official Shamsi Beg, this tablet was delivered to Ali Pasha, the prime minister, to be given to the Sultan. Sultan Abdul Aziz failed to respond. The text of this tablet is not available. However, its tenor can be perceived from certain paragraphs on Sultan Abdul Aziz in the Surah of Muluk, addressed at a later date in Adrianople to the concourse of monarchs. Thus, the third and the most glorious phase in the unfoldment of the mission of Bahá'u'lláh, that is his proclamation at its very beginning in Constantinople. 4 months after the arrival of Bahá'u'lláh in Constantinople, Sultan Abdul Aziz, the Ottoman Sultan, issued the edict for the banishment of Bahá'u'lláh from Constantinople to Adrianople. This decision involved Ali Pasha, Sultan's prime minister, and Fuad Pasha, the Sultan's foreign minister, and also Mirza Hussein Khan, the Persian ambassador. They were exiled from Constantinople to Adrianople in the severe cold of winter. Some were mounted on pack animals, others were to ride in wagons. They arrived in Adrianople on December 12, 1863. This was the third banishment of Bahá'u'lláh. The proclamation of Bahá'u'lláh that had its beginning in Constantinople continued on with fuller force and greater intensity in Adrianople. 5 years later, on August 12, 1868, order was issued for further banishment and exile of Bahá'u'lláh toward the penal colony of Akka. This was the fourth banishment of Bahá'u'lláh. The course of continuing banishments and exile of Bahá'u'lláh, leading to his proclamation to the kings and rulers of his time, the third glorious phase in the unfoldment of his revelation, may be seen on a schematic map of the region. Phase 1 was the secret intimation in 1853 in Tehran, in the Siachal, the Black Pit. It led to his banishment toward Baghdad. Phase 2, the announcement of his mission in the Garden of Ridvan to his companions in Baghdad. This was followed with his banishment to Constantinople, taking this course through 22 villages. And phase 3, his proclamation, starting from Constantinople and Adrianople. On August 12, 1868, Bahá'u'lláh and some of the faith's followers, accompanied by Turkish captain together with his soldiers, set out on a 4-day journey, riding in carriages and stopping on their way at Uzun Köprü and Kashane, arrived in Gallipoli. And from there, they were banished, taking this course to Smyrna, on to Alexandria, and arriving in Akka. In Akka, that proclamation was to shine with greater radiance and brilliancy. Again, the path of this fourth banishment of Bahá'u'lláh, starting from Adrianople toward its destination, Akka. That is from Adrianople, August 12, 1868, on to Uzun Köprü, to Kashane, to Gallipoli, to Medeli, to Smyrna, on to Alexandria, to Port Said, Jaffa, Haifa, and Akka. Arriving in Akka on August 31, 1868. Along this path, on the way from Kashane to the next stop, Gallipoli, Baha'u'lláh addressed the Surah of Rais to Ali Pasha, the Prime Minister of Sultan Abdulaziz, wherein Baha'u'lláh warned and foretold the demise of the Prime Minister. Shortly after his arrival in Akka, Baha'u'lláh sent a second letter, Loh-e Rais, to Ali Pasha, wherein Baha'u'lláh predicted that God's wrathful anger will seize him. Almost after a decade, the government of Ali Pasha was swept into oblivion. Another tablet, Loh-e Fuad, was also sent from Akka. Fuad Pasha had been the Ottoman foreign minister, wherein Baha'u'lláh affirmed his predictions. The arrival of Baha'u'lláh in the Bay of Akka on August 31, 1868. Akka was the penal colony to which murderers, highway robbers, and political agitators were consigned from all parts of the Turkish Empire. It was the most desolate of cities. People came to jeer him, the new arrival, a prisoner, and an exile. Baha'u'lláh had assurance of the victory of his cause. Upon arrival in Akka, he had a most glorious and sublime vision of the triumph of his cause. That may be thus envisioned through my rendering of the next image, the banners of light. In a tablet, the Loh-e Sayyah, Baha'u'lláh states, upon our arrival, we were welcomed with banners of light, whereupon the voice of spirit cried out, saying, soon will all that dwell on earth be enlisted under these banners. Thus Baha'u'lláh was assured and thus predicted the ultimate success of his cause. Together with those who accompanied him, Baha'u'lláh was cast in the prison of Akka, known as the Most Great Prison, the prison in which murderers, highway robbers, and political agitators were consigned from all parts of the Turkish Empire. The order issued by the Sultan was to subject the exiles who had been accused of leading others astray to long-term imprisonment with strict confinement. Their daily ration of food was 3 loaves of black bread for each prisoner. The Farman, the order of the Sultan, was read publicly soon after the arrival of the exiles in the principal mosque of the city, that the prisoners should not associate with the local inhabitants. Through the course of this 4th phase of his banishment and exile, Baha'u'lláh continued on with full force with his proclamation. Baha'u'lláh continued to address the kings and rulers of his time, a process which had started from Constantinople and Adrianople and had continued through the course of his banishment to Akka, now proceeded from the Most Great Prison of Akka. During the course of his imprisonment in the Most Great Prison, some of his followers traveled on foot from distant parts just to catch a glimpse of him. Baha'u'lláh viewed them from that upper window of his cell in the Most Great Prison, overlooking the desolate Bay of Akka. They felt blessed to see just the motion of the hand of Baha'u'lláh. From that prison, Baha'u'llah's proclamation to the kings and rulers continued, shedding its light with yet greater intensity, with greater brilliancy. In the words of Abdul Baha, it was a star, now it became a mighty sun. Baha'u'lláh was in the Most Great Prison over 2 years. Due to the mobilization of Turkish troops, Baha'u'lláh and those who accompanied him were removed from the barracks. The proclamation of his mission continued after Baha'u'lláh left the Most Great Prison. From the house of Abud in Akka, within the city wall, in 1873, Baha'u'lláh revealed in Arabic, many copies of these were made, the Book of Aqdas, his most holy book. Therein, Baha'u'lláh delineated the charter of the future civilization. Therein, he addressed some of the noblest passages of his most holy book. Therein, he issued summons to several sovereigns and also to the presidents of the Great Republic of the West. and addressed collectively the body of ecclesiastics. Therein, once again, he announced his mission to the kings of the earth, both in the East and in the West, both Christian and Muslim, who he had admonished and warned in the Surah of Muluk, revealed in Adrianople. The summons of Baha'u'lláh to the kings and rulers. Along the path of his banishment and exile, starting from Constantinople on, Baha'u'lláh addressed the kings, rulers, and ecclesiastics. The scope of the proclamation of Baha'u'lláh is extensive, unprecedented in the annals of religions. It may be organized and classified in a number of ways. I wish to offer a brief overview, organized based on the place from where these summons were addressed. From Constantinople, tablet to Sultan Abdulaziz, the Ottoman Sultan. From Adrianople, the first tablet to Napoleon III, tablet to Nasruddin Shah. Later, this tablet was carried from Akka and hand-delivered to the Shah by the heroic youth Badi. Tablet to the kings collectively, that is Surah of Muluk, to the entire company of monarchs of East and West. From Gallipoli, Surah Rais to Ali Pasha, the Ottoman Prime Minister. From Akka, second tablet to Napoleon. Tablet to Tsar Alexander II. Tablet to Queen Victoria. Tablet to Pius IX. And in the Atlas, he issued summons to Wilhelm I, the conqueror of Napoleon, and the Emperor of Germany, to Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria and King of Hungary, to the rulers of America and the President of the Republic therein, to the ecclesiastics collectively. Two previously mentioned tablets sent from Akka complete the overview of the scope, extent, and range of these summons. That is also from Akka, Lohe Rais to Ali Pasha, the Prime Minister of Sultan Abdulaziz, and Lohe Fuad, addressed to Fuad Pasha, the Foreign Minister of the Sultan. His third glorious phase in the disclosure of Baha'u'llah's revelation, his proclamation to the kings and rulers, its zenith, its pinnacle, was expansive with a wide scope. It encompassed letters and summons to the king and rulers collectively, and also to the kings and rulers individually. Baha'u'lláh wrote to the religious leaders, ecclesiastics of the Zoroastrian, Jewish, Christian, and Islamic faith, and to an individual ecclesiastic. His proclamation had a wide scope. It may be thus classified to the kings and rulers individually, to the kings and rulers collectively, to an individual ecclesiastic, to the ecclesiastics collectively. The proclamation of Baha'u'lláh, the kings and rulers addressed by Baha'u'lláh individually. The summon of Baha'u'lláh to individual kings and rulers is extensive. These bear significant implication, requiring an in-depth study and reflection against the context of the history of their times. Therefore, in the interest of brevity and conservation of time, I wish to very briefly introduce those kings and rulers addressed by Baha'u'lláh. Let us meet them. These were Napoleon III, Emperor of the French, who ruled from 1852 to 1870. Baha'u'lláh addressed Napoleon twice. The first was from Adrianople. It was reported that Napoleon threw aside the tablet sent to him by Baha'u'lláh. The second time was the tablet Baha'u'lláh sent to Napoleon from Akka, forwarded through the French minister in Akka. In this tablet, Baha'u'lláh predicted the downfall of Napoleon. To Kaiser Wilhelm I, in the Atlas, Baha'u'lláh issued summon to Kaiser Wilhelm I. In his summon to Kaiser Wilhelm in the Atlas, Baha'u'lláh predicted that lamentations of Berlin would be raised and that the banks of Rhine would be covered in gold. The first lamentation of Berlin relates to World War I, and the second lamentation of Berlin to World War II. Franz Joseph, the Emperor of Austria and the King of Hungary. Tsar Alexander II, the all-powerful Tsar of Russia. Queen Victoria, Queen of United Kingdom and Ireland, and also Empress of India. Nasruddin Shah, the Shah of the Qajar dynasty from 1848 to 1896. To Nasruddin Shah, Baha'u'lláh revealed a tablet, the lengthiest epistle to any single sovereign, wherein he adjured Nasruddin Shah to rule with justice, described God's summon to himself to arise and proclaim his message, proclaim his belief in the unity of God and in his prophets, uttered several prayers on behalf of the Shah. In that same tablet, Baha'u'lláh demonstrated the validity of his mission, expressed the wish to be brought face to face with the divines of the age, to produce proofs and testimonies. This tablet was hand-delivered to Nasruddin Shah, as already mentioned, by the heroic youth Badi. Nasruddin Shah was assassinated on May 1st, 1896, at the shrine of Shah Abdulaziz on the eve of the grand jubilee that was to celebrate and honor him. Thus, his rule came to an end in 1896. The Qajar dynasty came to an end in 1925. Sultan Abdulaziz, the Ottoman Sultan, was responsible for 3 decrees of banishment of Baha'u'lláh. As a consequence of a palace revolution, Sultan Abdulaziz was deposed, condemned by a fatwa of the Mufti of his town, his capital, and was later assassinated in 1876. The 600-year Ottoman Empire crumbled. It came to an end on November 1922. Pope Pius IX, head of the Catholic Church from 1846 to 1878, as a prisoner in the army barracks of the penal colony of Akka, Baha'u'lláh addressed a most weighty epistle to Pope Pius IX, in which he addressed the Pope with authority and majesty, wherein he identified himself as the return of Christ in the glory of the Father. The papacy of Pope Pius IX brought a turning point in Catholic history, a virtual extinction of Pope's temporal sovereignty. Pope Pius IX was the last Pope to rule over papal states. In the end, thus, Baha'u'lláh also admonished the rulers of America and the presidents of the republics therein. With these words, adorn ye the temple of dominion with the ornament of the remembrance of justice and the fear of God, and its head with the crown of remembrance of your Lord, the creator of heavens. Bind with the hands of justice the broken, and crush the oppressor with the rod of the commandment of the Lord, the ordainer. Such are the words directed at America and its rulers. The American nation has been endowed with a spiritual destiny, a lofty destiny, to raise the banner, to unfurl the standard of the most great peace. The scope of the proclamation of Baha'u'lláh to the kings and rulers. The proclamation of Baha'u'lláh was expansive. Baha'u'lláh, as a prisoner and an exile, proclaimed his message to the most powerful rulers of his time, as well as to the ecclesiastics and religious leaders. The wide outreach of such commanding summons to the sovereigns and religious leaders from a prophet founder of a religion, a prisoner and an exile, is unprecedented in the history of religions. Such outreach is a reflection of the breadth of the mission of Baha'u'lláh for the reconstruction of society and his vision of a global civilization wherein all nations, races, and religions can be unified. He admonished these leaders to heed his guidance. The proclamation of Baha'u'lláh to the kings and rulers, the path to peace. These letters were addressed at a critical point in history. Animosity, hostility, and conflict were at high levels. Europe was in turmoil, buildup of armaments had escalated. European countries were stockpiling their weapons. Europe was at the brink of a major conflagration. The exigencies of the times required warnings. Through such extensive summons, Baha'u'lláh offered the path to peace while there was yet time. We may wonder, had the call of Baha'u'lláh been heeded, when there was yet a window of opportunity for peace, would the First World War have been averted, and consequently the Second World War? Baha'u'lláh offered the path to peace while there was yet time. It was not heeded. Alas, the First World War broke out 22 years after the end of the earthly life of Baha'u'lláh. The call raised by a captive and an exile and a prisoner addressed to the most powerful and influential rulers of his time and to the ecclesiastics reverberate over the ages and centuries. May it admonish and instruct the war-torn humanity to follow the path to peace toward the reconstruction of society. Baha'u'lláh prophesied his triumph upon earth, though no king be found who would turn his face toward him. This presentation, the banishment of Baha'u'lláh from Baghdad to Constantinople and beyond, was a brief overview of the 4 banishments and exiles of Baha'u'lláh. The unfoldment of the mission of Baha'u'lláh culminated in its glorious 3rd phase through the proclamation of Baha'u'lláh to the world, its rulers, and its ecclesiastics, and to humanity. I want to express my appreciation for all those who listened to this presentation on the banishment and exile of Baha'u'lláh from Baghdad to Constantinople and beyond.
Thank you so much, Jena. That was an amazing survey, really, of, I'm not even sure how many years we covered there, certainly a decade of time, perhaps a bit more, of probably the most productive and busy time of Baha'u'llah's life, and also the most tragic, with the actual physical exiles and the physical imprisonments. And in spite of all that, these amazing accomplishments. So thank you so much for reviewing all that for us and for our audience. I think a lot of people will find it extremely helpful to be able to go over this and to follow it sort of year by year and month by month. We do have a few comments in the Q&A here. Mario says, is a map of the journey of the most great name from Tehran, Baghdad, Mosul, and on to Constantinople available? Thank you for this beautiful and lovely presentation. I love maps.
I am not on that. The question to me means the import of that would imply that there probably, likely there is such a map in several books. But at this moment, I can't refer to the source of these.
Yeah, I think you could probably find it in, well, you might be able to find it in Bahá'u'lláh's book, Bahá'u'lláh, King of Glory. I suspect there might be a map there. So there may be some places where it would be available. Ania asks, does the World Center have a copy of the summons of Baha'u'lláh to Constantinople?
That summon is in the Aqdas, the summon of Baha'u'lláh to the people of Constantinople and to the land situated between the 2 seas. I'm not aware, and if it is there, undoubtedly the World Center has access to it.
Yeah, she may be asking about whether we have a copy of the fatwa demanding, or the decree demanding that Baha'u'lláh move or come to, or the invitation of Baha'u'lláh to Constantinople. I suspect we would have that, since it came in writing and it would have been preserved in the Baha'i World Center's records. I suspect that's what she's referring to, though I don't know. Bahia Mitchell writes, wonderful, thorough research for previously unknown facts what do you attribute the good reception he received in the villages of Iraq? Is it because they were Kurdish villages?
That is possible because of the ethnicity. I'm not sure, but I know that Ali Pasha had already sent a letter with the guard who was accompanying the exiles. I had already communicated to the governors of the places through which they would be passing to afford to them their hospitality and their utmost respect. I believe that that has something to do with it. But then later, when they had they got a sense of the mission of Bahá'u'lláh, even in a fragmented form, and they probably, that by itself instilled a lot of respect. So they came out to meet them and to greet them and to celebrate their passage through their villages.
Yeah, that sounds like a good response to me as well. Virginia asks this: the presentation was lovely and much appreciated. You will no doubt remember me, no doubt not remember me, but you and your husband were witnesses to my marriage in October of 1996 in Wilmette. We are still married, and when I saw your name, I wanted to join and thank you for your generous support all those years ago. As I said, your presentation was lovely and I enjoyed it very much. Best wishes, Virginia Twombly. I don't see where she's from now.
Thank you very much, Virginia. I appreciate that expression of your sentiment. I truly appreciate that. And I appreciate your presence in this setting.
Shahala asks this question: were all the members of the Holy Family with Baha'u'lláh on this trip?
Certain members accompanied Baha'u'lláh when he was exiled from Tehran to Iraq. Certain members accompanied Baha'u'lláh, but not all of them.
Right, Mirza Mehdi came later, for example.
Yes.
But presumably Mirza Mehdi accompanied Baha'u'lláh from Baghdad forward to Istanbul and Edirne and then on to Adrianople, I suppose, because he was older by then.
Yes, yes.
Because he was born in, Biha Khanum was born in 46 or 48, I can't remember which, so he was born after that. So he was quite young when they crossed the mountains from Tehran to Baghdad. So he had to stay back in Tehran at that time.
Yes.
Let's see what else we have here. There's some other questions here. Francis says, do you know if the resting place of Monib in Izmir is known? I don't know which Monib this is.
I'm not aware of that. I do not know.
This wasn't a Monib you mentioned, it seems to me. So this may be someone else.
Did I mention a Monib?
I don't think you did. So I think he's asking some other question. And Mario says, merci with the warmest gratitude. So that's another thank for you and another comment.
My pleasure.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Do you have any comments at all, additional comments at all about the accommodations Baha'u'lláh had? For example, in Istanbul, I don't recall what sort of house he was staying in Istanbul. And
when we were in Istanbul, the last time we were in Istanbul, we wanted to visit that accommodation. I don't know whether it is available now, but at that time it was not. So we have not visited Istanbul. We have not visited that accommodation when Baha'u'lláh was in Istanbul.
Have you seen the house in Edirne and Adrianople?
Yes, yes. We have visited Edirne a number of times, and we have visited that house in Edirne. Yes.
Yeah, I would love to see that sometime. We don't have any other questions here. So I don't know if we'll have additional comments here. Francis continued to say, the Monib who walked on foot 1,000 miles with Abdul Baha before Baha'u'llah's Hawda. That's the one who apparently was buried in Izmir.
Oh, okay. It's that Monib you're talking about. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, but I don't think we have any information about where he's buried in Izmir.
I don't.
Yeah,
I don't. No.
yeah, I don't have it.
Another one. Yeah.
Let's see if we have anything else here. On YouTube, a viewer asks this: how long was the journey from Baghdad to Constantinople? In what season were they traveling? What was the weather like?
Well, they started, it was May 3rd, was the starting day in Firayjat. And after 9 days, which would have been 9th of May, they started on that journey. It took about 110 days and it was 1,000 miles. So they arrived in Samsun, actually in Baghdad, in Constantinople. They arrived on 16th of August. So it was 110 days. So they arrived in the heat of summer in Constantinople. And a good part of their travel also, there was a lot of, it was warm, it was hot, and sometimes they had to travel by at night because of the heat of the day. I don't know whether that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. He asked about the distance, and of course, part of the distance was from Samsun to Constantinople was by steamer, so they didn't have to walk that one at least. But the distance up to Samsun must have been close to 1,000 miles as well. Certainly,
it was 1,000 miles. But I tried to track that distance. If you were to fly to Samsun, it would be 700 miles. But because of tortuous roads, mountainous paths, Balyuzi mentions it as 110 days and 1,000 miles. So that sounds very reasonable.
Yeah.
Did not travel because there are various mishaps to the hudas, the animals. So some days they did not travel, and they tried to travel at night because the day was too hot. And so the tortuous roads, and taking all of that into consideration, I think 1,000 miles is not an exaggeration.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Let's see. So that was, we had that particular question twice. Okay. When Bahá'u'lláh was imprisoned and banished, does the Baha'i Faith own the properties today where he was imprisoned and banished?
You mean where he was imprisoned in Iran?
Well, I think they're referring to the various places in Constantinople, Adrianople, Akka, and Baghdad, of course.
In Adar, we are aware that what those sites were. In Baghdad, I don't believe so. In Baghdad, the Garden Ridvan, which was Najibiya Garden.
That's now in the middle of a hospital complex, I understand, because it was built over. That's what I've heard. And of course, the house of Bahá'u'lláh in Baghdad was confiscated way back in the 20s, and then it was demolished. But the properties in Akka we own where he lived.
Oh, that is for sure, yes.
Yeah, and people go on pilgrimage to see those all the time, fortunately. Let's see, I think that was the answer to that question. And let's see what else we have here. We may have a few more coming in. I don't see anything else right now. So perhaps we can wrap this up. I don't know. Do you have any other closed comments or anything else you want to mention?
Well, what I want to say that this was a wonderful project, and I want to express my appreciation to the audience and also to the webinar, because it compelled me to really dig into the books and consequently become very excited and inspired by the whole process, and in particular, that journey from Baghdad to Constantinople,
Yeah.
It was very moving how that happened. And I think maybe at some future time, I don't know whether it's possible or not, but I'm just fantasizing. There could be maybe a reenactment of that by Bahá'u'lláh, by individuals taking that journey in the memory of Bahá'u'lláh. I don't know if that's possible or will ever happen, but I was fantasizing with that possibility.
Perhaps someday in the future when it's safer to cross all of those international borders, it'll be a little easier to do.
Well, I don't know how many borders there would be. Actually, from Baghdad, there would be a border there, continuing on to Constantinople, straight through Anatolia. It probably would not be that prohibitive, but then, of course, it would never be the same because these were sometimes backward villages, very harsh surroundings. But even if it were to be harsh experience, that in itself would be uplifting.
Yeah, nowadays there's probably a good road, and you might not be able to go through all the same villages, but you could probably go from Baghdad to Samsun in 2 days on a road by car. You know, if it's probably less than 1,000 miles now because of tunnels and road cuts and things. You know, you might actually have difficulty trying to follow the exact paths Baha'u'lláh followed because a lot of them may be underwater because of dams and all sorts of things. But that would be quite an interesting experience.
But
Alex,
it is that episode from Baha'u'llah's, the travel from Baghdad to Constantinople, for me anyway, when I started studying it and I said, oh my gosh, all these years I had not been completely aware of that. And it was, for me, it was a new revelation. Maybe it is for some among the audience too. We read about the exile of Baha'u'lláh from actually Constantinople, Adrianople, and on. That is somewhat more familiar, but that journey on these Hudas Kajave, in that form, in that way, with that many people and with so many obstacles, is something that had not infiltrated into my psyche. But now it has, and I want to thank you for this invitation.
How long did it take you to do the research?
Quite a long time, because I read a number of books, whatever was available. Yeah, but it was joyous research.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was
We do have another question from Alex Boyson. What might have been the significance of the banishment, particularly from Constantinople to Adrianople? Was Adrianople of any special importance in the Ottoman Empire?
Adrianople was quite a significant city in the among the Ottoman Empire. It was those of you who have visited Adrianople, Edirne, that point is often mentioned. How important Edirne was in the Ottoman Empire, and also Edirne is at the extreme border of the empire. In fact, it has been said that with Baha'u'llah's banishment to Adrianople, he was the only religious founder of a religion who actually his banishment transversed and extended to the European continent, because Adrianople is technically part of the European continent.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, it's not that many miles from both the Greek and Bulgarian borders, from what I understand. It's right at the very edge of Turkey there.
And besides, Edirne was the capital at one time of the Ottomans.
Yes, before they took Istanbul, it was the capital. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite an interesting point as well. And it has some pretty magnificent mosques as a result of that. Well, I don't see any other comments and questions. So I want to thank you again, Jena, for this marvelous presentation. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today for the Wilmette Institute's webinar series. We hope that you have enjoyed the program and you will take many insights from it into your life and to discourse with others. Please tell others about our series so they can benefit also from our amazing array of top topics that the Baha'i Faith covers. We hope to see you all again soon, and thank you very much, and goodbye.